Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Donahue, the Associate Dean here for Public and External Affairs. And welcome to today's talk, Mind the Gap, Changing U.S. Income and Wealth Disparity, with Sister Simone Campbell. Sister Simone is here as part of the Wilson School's Leadership Through Mentorship program, where she's able to visit classes and meet with students over meals. It's a really terrific program that we have, and then deliver a public talk. And today, this leadership program, today's visitor is sponsored through Judy and Bob Rawson. And so I'm so glad that you're here because we get to say thank you in person for helping for this program. I'm sure that you will all find Sister Simone as impressive as I have, and I just met her this morning. She wears many hats. She's a religious leader, attorney, poet, author, with extensive experience in public policy and advocacy for systemic change. She also has been on the Colbert Report. During the 2010 congressional debate over health care reform, Sister Simone wrote the famous Nuns Letter, supporting the Affordable Care Act, and recruited leaders representing 59,000 Catholic sisters in the United States to sign on. This has often been cited as a critical turning point to the passing of Obamacare, for which she was appropriately thanked by President Obama and invited to the signing ceremony. In 2012, she led the first Nuns on the Bus tour in opposition to a federal budget proposed by Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Paul Ryan, and passed by the House of Representatives. Over 27,000 miles in 9 states, they protested the bill's proposed cuts to programs for poor and working families. A second tour took place in 2013 with a focus on comprehensive immigration reform, and third, recently, on voter turnout. In 2014, Sister Simone published her book, A Nun on the Bus, How All of Us Can Create Hope, Change, and Community. We will host a book sale and signing of this wonderful book after today's talk. While Sister Simone and her fellow religious sisters have received accolades and gratitude throughout the country, the so-called radical feminist nuns, and I think of that as a compliment, have not escaped criticism. After an investigation spearheaded by American Catholic bishops, it was concluded that the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, which represents a majority of Catholic sisters in the United States, was focusing its work, quote unquote, too much on poverty and economic justice, while keeping silent on abortion and same-sex marriage. To this now well-known critique, Sister Simone responded, quote, "We haven't violated any teaching. We have just been raising questions and interpreting politics." At the Wilson School, we make it our mission to raise questions and interpret politics. So we look forward to an engaging talk today with Sister Simone about the critical issue of inequality in America. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I have to say, this is like heaven. To be in a place that nourishes conversation and asking pesky questions, how fabulous is that? So thanks for coming to this public part. And the joy of this was I only had to prepare one talk. A few weeks ago, I was up in Connecticut, and I had 5 talks in one day. And by the end, it seemed like that was excessive. And it was Sunday. It was supposed to be a day of rest. But, well, today, what I want to do is talk about income and wealth disparity, which I think is at the heart of much that is problematic in our society. We'll do a little exercise since we're in such an esteemed academic setting. And then we'll open it up for conversation, okay? And I must confess, it's the conversation that always excites me the most because I've heard me talk before, so. In this intersection of income and wealth disparity, what I've realized is that it is the consequence of policies that we have made as a nation, and we were quite blind to originally. And what I have realized is that I think they are rooted in a perspective of individualism. And our I'm a Californian, I'm sorry. I'm glad to say, but I'm sorry that we exported two lovely presidents from California. And one of them, President Reagan, really began the rewriting of the American story. And he began that by saying that the West was won by the rugged individual. And he had this picture of the lone man, white man, on a horse riding off into the sunset as if that man was the one who settled the West. Nothing against you guys, but, or against the horse either. But the challenge is that our nation was settled by communities. You never saw a single wagon headed west. It'd be very hard to circle your wagon. You never saw barn raising where just one person showed up. You never had a quilting bee where just one person was quilting. I did try to make a quilt once by myself, by hand, and very quickly recruited others. It's just too big of a job. And creating our society was too big of a job for an individual. We the people is who we are. It's not we the individual, it's not we the economy, it's not we the ones who got here first, it's not we the rich folks, it's we the people. It's all of us together trying to form a more perfect union. But losing sight of that reality in individualism has created a set of fear, entitlement of those who can take what they can, and a sense of destitution with those who are left behind. And what we advocate for at my organization Network is for the 100%. We have to reclaim the reality that it is all of us together who make our nation. It's all of us together who can create the future. And for those of you students here, it's all of us together that you need, that we need your creativity to find some new solutions. So what we have so far are decisions that have made this income inequality and wealth inequality in our nation the reality. Now, one of the great issues is trickle-down economics. And President Reagan said, you know, let's cut the top tax rate, for top tax margin, from about 80% down to about 33%. And we'll cut it down because, you know what? We'll give money to those at the top and they'll make more jobs. We now have enough evidence that it didn't work. However, we do have, we continue to hear that. But Pope Francis, who I adore, it's probably wrong. It's so nice to quote a pope positively, you know, it's great. Well, Pope Francis says that some people continue to defend trickle-down theories, which assure that economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and in the sacralized workings of the prevailing economic system. Meanwhile, the excluded are still waiting. He then goes on to say that these same folks who create an idol, really, out of the market, they reject the rights of states charged with a vigilance for the common good to exercise any form of control. Hence, a new tyranny is thus born. I believe that it is that new tyranny that we struggle with in the United States, the tyranny that Wall Street will take care of it if we just give them a free rein. The fact is, these are all creatures created by human species, given to excess at times, like any human endeavor. And it's our role, the role of government, the role of public policy, in my view, is to do as Pope Francis says, is to corral that free, autonomous use, which ends up in exploitation of the most challenged in our society. So where we are right now is we're beginning to say as a nation, oh my, we have trouble. But the big challenge is going to be, where do we go from there? So what I want to do in this next little part, because we're in such a prestigious organization, prestigious school, I knew that Princeton and this program is sort of oriented to, what can I say, highfalutin economic analysis. So we're going to do some lowfalutin economic analysis, because I'm only a lawyer. But what I want to do is to create with you a bar graph, a human bar graph that shows the change in the economy, the change in income for the various quintiles. Now, usually I'm in places where I have to explain quintile just means 20%, but here I'm sure you all know what a quintile is. So we're going to see what the change in income has been over the last 30 years, the percentage of change. Now, the first thing that you need to know is that between 1949 and 1979, everybody's income went up about 100%. Bravo, bravissimo. The bottom went up 116%. The top went up, I think it was 87%. And everybody knows that 87% of a large number is going to be way bigger than 116% of a small number. But everybody participated pretty proportionally, okay? That was just theory. I used to make a bar graph of that, but my audience would get bored, and they say, oh, you could see people's eyes rolling. That was just, so now I just tell people that. Now, what we need, I need 5 volunteers from the student side for a standing non-speaking part. Why don't you come on down? I've asked a couple, come on down, come on down. Perfect, God love you. And then 2 of you can be thinking, because I'm going to have an advanced class, I'm going to need 2 more at the end, so you can be thinking. Okay, so you're going to have to help me with names.
Andrea.
Andrea, you're going to be the bottom 20%, and oh, Hannah.
Yep.
Hannah, you're going to be next to the bottom, and Kelly is going to be the beloved middle class. Everyone believes they are the middle class. It doesn't matter what you make. You think you are the middle class. And many people rail against politicians because they never talk about poverty. It's because nobody thinks they're poor, okay? So, Kelly, you represent us in the middle class. And Roxy, you're going to be next to the top. Mo, you are going to be our top 20%.
I'm going to get booed.
No, you're not. We're for the 100%. We're for you too, Mo. Okay, so now we don't exactly have a straight line here, but let's run it. The bar, everybody remembers bar graphs? You run them up, x-axis, y-axis, got it? Okay. So we'll just see that little line there. So why don't you come here? You're going to be our guinea pig, because the top is always the leader. See this line right there?
Sure.
Okay, put your toes up against the... Okay, well, that line, all right. It's a little ahead of the line I was thinking of, but it's fine. Okay, now, you're going to take 1 step for every 5% change. And I am pleased to tell you, now remember, 49 to 79, everybody went up about 100%. 1980 to 2010, your income went up 49.7%. So we'll just call it 50%.
Okay.
So you get to take 1 step for every 5% change, which that works out to be 10 steps. Woohoo! Okay, 10 steps. So just head up the stairs. Okay, one, a little larger. Don't be too shy. Don't be too shy. Because we need 1, perfect. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 10. Oh, we're going to lose. Oh, okay, very good. Oh, all right, human bar graph, excellent. Okay, now, Roxy, I was afraid. Mo, Roxy. Okay, Roxy, come on down. Put your toes. You're going to go up that same way. Okay, there you go. All right. Now, oh, beloved, 60 to 80%. Roxy, your income in the same 30-year period, your income went up 23%. So you get 4.5 steps. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.5. All right. Kelly, come on down. Oh, beloved middle class. Back a little teeny bit. There you go. Okay. Beloved middle class, in the same 30-year period, your income went up 11%. You get 2 steps. Ready? 1, 2. Make them worthwhile. That's a Princeton student for you. Okay. Okay, Hannah. Up just 10. Okay. Beloved next to the bottom, Hannah, in the same 30-year period, your income went up 4%. You get 1 step. Or is that it? No, you get more than that. No, you get a whole step. You get 1 step. Okay, 1. All right, there you go. Don't spend it all in one place. All right. Andrea? Andrea. Oh, beloved bottom.
Oh, dear.
Lo siento mucho, señorita. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your income actually went down 7%. So you're going to have to take a step and a half back, which is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So why don't you just kind of sidle on over there? Okay. Yeah, there it is, step and a half. Very creative, the Princeton students. Okay, look at this. So we have Mo, whose income went up 50%. And then with Roxy is the next. Roxy's actually less than half of what Mo's was. And then we get this gaggle of 60% of our population down here with Andrea's actually slipping back. But Mo is hiding something, not intentionally. But this is where I need 2 volunteers to be the advanced class. Can I have 2 more volunteers, please? Help, don't be shy. I've understood Princeton students are bold. What? The women are bold. And above average. Okay, so you're Abby. Why don't you be our top 5%, Abby, and Elizabeth, you'll be our top 1%. Okay, so line yourself up. There you go, perfect. Abby, now I always have to check my cheat sheet on this one. Mo is hiding the fact that, remember, this is an average, and so she's hiding the fact that the top 5% in this same 30-year period, your income went up 73%. So you get 15.5 steps. You ready? Okay, on your mark, get set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and a half.
It's going to be my workout.
All right, Elizabeth? Yes. If you have a Fitbit like I do, I think this will be fine, okay? Oh, top 1%. Beloved 1%, in this same 30-year period, your income went up 224%. You get 45 steps.
Should I just run to the top and just...
And then, kind of go around. Let's try it. Let's see how far you actually get. Okay, 45. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 9, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. What do you think? It's this spatial relationship that, for me, explains Governor Romney's comment in the 2012 election, where Governor Romney, who's actually in the 0.1%, who's would be probably in Trenton. No, seriously. When he said his perception was 47% of our population are takers.
Yeah, right.
The distance between the top reality of the top 1% and the bulk of our people is so far, is that they don't see each other. Now, the American Psychological Association did a study to see who's most stressed in the United States. And you know what they found out? They found out it wasn't Andrea. You would think that Andrea at the bottom would be the most stressed. They found out that the bottom knows they're toast. You know, it's just impossible. But the most stressed was Hannah's category, because what Hannah experiences with a 4% rise in income in 30 years is that she knows a bunch of her friends and family have slipped back with Andrea, and how difficult the balance is. The second most stressed, and I forgot your name, Abby, is Abby at the 5%, because Abby wants to be Elizabeth. And so Abby, quite often, with a fairly good income, uses credit cards way too much or tries to look like Elizabeth. Now, the challenge is, in 2010 dollars, Abby is $200,000 a year in income, and Elizabeth is 1.2 million. So that the 200,000 is the wannabe for being up here, which creates a huge amount of stress. Now, ironically, I'm a sister of social service. My community does social work, and my first job was a social worker in Beverly Hills. And what I did was mostly I worked with organizing domestics to get days off and things like that, and worked with the teenagers on drugs. And what the teenagers were, I loved it. I loved the work. It was fabulous. But we often, several times I did an intervention with a teenager telling their parents that they needed drug treatment. And so what happened was, it was probably a 1% type situation. What happened was, this time we were doing an intervention, I'll never forget, and the first words out of this mother's mouth after her son told her and her husband that he needed treatment, she said, no, she said, "The neighbors don't know, do they?" The fear and the social pressure in the Abby and Elizabeth world is huge. Whereas that same reality here is much more about, oh, we need help, who can we ask for help, how are we connected, who can we go to, how can we talk about it. The individualism in our society is keeping people afraid of each other and setting up the Hollywood aspiration of separation. And separation also allows this reality to continue. I also had the honor of meeting somebody in Elizabeth's category, Jason, who I know some of the students were watching stuff on YouTube and stuff that I'd been doing. So you may have seen me take on Dinesh D'Souza in this thing. But I met Jason, who's in Elizabeth's category, and he pays a living wage to his workers. So he makes sure that people are not just making minimum wage down in Andrea's category. And you know, to make minimum wage, federal minimum wage, is to make $15,000 a year before taxes. And so he makes sure that his people get paid more. He pays a living wage so that the lowest paid worker is up in Hannah's category here, the second category. But what he said was he was realized that his tax dollars were going to fund his competitors. His tax dollars were funding his competitors because his competitors paid low wages, minimum wage, could bid lower contracts, cost contracts, and then had their employees use the social safety net for things like food stamps, housing vouchers, Medicaid. Those issues, those services are essential for low-wage workers. Somewhere in the course of this individualization, we have created a safety net that is really a business subsidy. And that business subsidy gets railed at in Congress because what they say is all of these folks in Andrea's category that are using the social safety net, well, they're lazy. Last year, I love Congressman Paul Ryan. He's just too much fun to argue with, but he hosted a briefing, and you get the majority gets 3 witnesses and the minority gets 1. The one witness for the minority, for the Democrats, was a low-wage worker. She was working full-time. She and her husband were both working full-time, but her family was still living in poverty. And they were able to use food stamps and Medicaid. And the Republican members of Congress kept saying to her, well, why don't you get a job? Well, I am working. The next question, well, why don't you get a job? The fact is that it is not in Elizabeth or Abby or even in Mo's mind the reality that folks at the bottom are more often than not also working. We have changed the agreement among us that the safety net is only for those falling on hard times and made it the business subsidy. But the other piece that I realized is we, the consumers of these services, want to pay the lowest possible price. I'm a great one for wanting a bargain. I got $185 shoes for $12.50. It's the best bargain ever. But then I realized, who else paid for the shoes? Now, what often happens is, in that case, I think it was just overstock, and I hope it's all right, because I really want to wear them with a clean conscience. But what I think that often happens is we don't ask for the just price so that Andrea and Hannah get paid a living wage. And so my insistence on the lowest possible price is putting pressure to help create these constraints. See how we're all in it together? We cannot point the finger at anyone because we're in this together. You might say, well, how this happened? Part of it was tax policy. Part of it was the undermining of labor unions. They got undermined because there was a really good work on the part of President Reagan and others to say unions were corrupt. Yep, unions are corrupt. Yeah, so is the market. So are the banks. We haven't seen people, well, anyway, we won't go to the banks. The fact is, that's the human condition, and how do we help people be our best selves? E.J. Dionne, you know E.J., the columnist, E.J. says that he's a columnist in the Washington Post and he gets syndicated, and E.J. says that in the Christian tradition of original sin is the reason we have government regulation, is that government regulation is there to help make us our best selves. That should be its goal. So the undermining of labor unions undermined the capacity to raise wages, which has caused this reality, flat wages for 30 years. Let's see, did I get them all? I think I got most of it. Oh, one other thing. The other piece was that the privatization of retirement programs. All of us old folks in the room, we all have our little pesky little IRAs and God knows what else. And we were all told that we knew how to invest our money better than either our employers or, you know, the union or anybody else. I can categorically say I don't know how to invest it. But everybody thinks it's a great idea. It's the market analysis that then made us interested in what was the tax rate for interest and dividends. And cutting that way back was really nice, thoughtful, very kind. But the majority of our income doesn't come from that. Our majority of income comes from wages. And that the challenge has been, it's Elizabeth, it's Abby who has benefited the most from those realities. It is true that reducing the taxes for them on interest and dividends has resulted in some great philanthropy that Princeton has benefited from. So it's not all bad. But the challenge is it's created this, and we all bought into it. Therein lies the challenge. Okay, let's thank the bar graph and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Abby. Appreciate it. So, well, now that we've done all that, well, what do we do? Network is working on a few projects, few policies that we think that could make a difference. The first is tax policy. We're part of a big coalition in DC that's promoting a transaction tax for Wall Street sales, the computerized sales, and would generate a fair amount of revenue. It's really cool to have some money into our government so it can do the hard work that needs doing. It's an untaxed area in the United States, though it's taxed in Europe. It's called the Robin Hood tax. That doesn't fly real well with some portions of the population, but it is a way of trying to get some revenue for needed services. We're also doing a thing April 15th, and I invite all of you to participate with us. April 15th, we're declaring is Taxpayer Pride Day. And we're encouraging everybody to take a picture of themselves. On our website, networklobby.org, we've got the whole thing up there. There's a thing you can print out and say, I have taxpayer pride for, and then it's whatever, you know, government service you're excited about to invest your money in. And so we're trying to change how we think about taxes from being a burden to being an investment. It's how civilized countries invest in what they care about. And quite frankly, what I care about are schools and bike lanes and good infrastructure and Amtrak and a whole variety of programs. So, and one of our staff was chasing down a snowplow a couple of weeks ago because she was proud to pay her taxes to make sure the snow got removed. And after this past winter, I think there would be others that share that goal. So we invite you to take a picture of yourself and send it in. Do it on social media. Follow me on Twitter. I'm very competitive with my Twitter following. I'm going for 12,000 followers, so I'm not too close yet. I'm 11,200 and some, so I have a ways to go. But the piece that we're trying to do is to change how we think about coming together as a nation and doing what we need to do. It's not about a burden. It's about a gift and an opportunity. It's about the fact that we're gifted to live in this nation and that we have to invest in it the way our parents and grandparents invested for us. And the challenge is to reframe the story in community. I've thought a lot about it, and I think one of the unintended consequences of focusing so much in the mid-20th century on civil rights is where we lost sight of. Civil rights got translated because of our Constitution into individual interests. and we lost sight of civil obligations. Civil obligations for me are the communitarian part. The communitarian part where I contribute to our society so all of us can do better. I contribute in policy and advocacy so all of us can do better. Lord knows I have some strong opinions about how I think we ought to get there. But the truth is, all of our voices are needed at the table to change the income and wealth disparity that's tearing us apart. It is true that the inequality is the source of social ill, as Pope Francis says, and we need to break that up. We need to change the direction. We need to move in a different way. So we hope that by creating pride in community, a sense of civil obligation as well as civil right helps us move together to create this more perfect union. Because while I do it because of faith, and faith motivates me. For me, I said earlier today with some of you that, you know, Jesus and justice both begin with J. They go together so that you cannot have one without the other. The fact is, unlike some faith folks who believe that we ought to force our opinions on everybody, I don't. I believe the joy of our nation is the pluralism, is the variety that we have, and it's the source of our creativity, and it's really an amazing experiment. But the challenge is where we do meet, where we do agree to meet, is in the Constitution. And it's we, the people of the United States, who form the more perfect union. And when you look at it, it's all the best part of any faith tradition, is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves, and, oh miracle, our posterity. We have got, in our civil obligations, we have got to change our moment-by-moment analysis of who wins, who loses. We've got to change politics from being about the game and more about governance. We've got to change this economic reality so that we look out for each other. And then we will be exercising our civil obligations. Now, there are days where I must confess I feel a little overwhelmed and like, oh my glory, be nice just to be holed up someplace in some quiet convent, you know? I often joke and say, you know, lead a quiet life, join the convent. That's my recommendation. But what I've come to learn is that our nation is hungry for this alternative. We need to come together. We need the science folks, we need the policy folks, we need the folks who disagree, we need the folks who agree, we need everybody. We need Elizabeth and Abby just as much as we need Andrea and Hannah. And of course, Amy, and the whole gang. We need you all, Kelly, and we need everyone. Because if we don't, this experiment of democracy is going to fail. And it's a serious time to address the common good. Now, when I'm feeling overwhelmed and kind of like, oh my glory, why don't you pick something smaller? I was reading the scripture when we came back from, I think it was the first bus trip, and I was just overwhelmed. Feeling like, oh my gosh, pushing back against the Ryan budget, touching this hungry need of our nation, trying to lift up civil obligations. What are we going to do? And I often open the scriptures to try to find a word of sustenance. And I opened to the story of loaves and fish. And do you remember the story of loaves and fish? Those of you that don't know the Christian scriptures or might have it someplace in your background and think, oh yeah, I'm sure I do. Let me just fill you in. It's Jesus wandering out in the desert kind of area, arid Israel, and a bunch of people have been following him all day. It's sort of like a bus trip before a bus. And the apostles say to Jesus, oh, send them back to town, please. Send them out to get food. They're going to get hungry and grumpy, and it's just going to be terrible. And Jesus says to the apostles, feed them yourselves. What? Feed them ourselves? We don't have anything, blah, blah. And Jesus says, well, what do you got? And this is sort of paraphrasing, but, and the apostles say, well, we've got 5 loaves and a couple of stinky fish, but what are these among so many? And then the story goes, Jesus blesses it. Jesus, the community organizer, has people sit down in groups of 50. It's fabulous. They make friends, you get to know each other. And they bless it and pass out food, and they ended up with 12 baskets left over. And the end of Matthew's Gospel's account is this very annoying passage. It says, 5,000 men were fed, to say nothing of the women and children. Well, that made me mad. I mean, what are we, chopped liver? So I have this odd spiritual life, so I prayed about it. And what I realized was they only counted the ones who thought it was a miracle. What woman is going to leave home for the day with her family and not bring snacks? But the guys are going to say, like always, food, oh, what a miracle. So to close this part, I want to end with a poem I wrote in reflection on this, because this is for me the work that we do and the challenge that we face. And it's called Loaves and Fish. I always joked that the miracle of loaves and fish was sharing. The women always knew this. But in this moment of need and notoriety, I ache, tremble, almost weep at folks so hungry, malnourished, faced with spiritual famine of epic proportions. My heart aches with their need. Apostle-like I whine. What are we among so many? The consistent 2,000-year-old ever-new response is this. Blessed and broken, you are enough. I savor the blessed, cower at the broken, and pray to be enough. Thank you very much. Oh, please, this is my favorite part.
Come on down to the mics and ask your questions. Students, come on down. Come on, even if you weren't part of the bar crowd.
But Andrea gets special privilege.
So I'm Andrea Michelson. I'm a first-year MPA student, Master of Public Affairs. And since this was kind of short timing, I was trying to articulate my question. But I guess it's, how do you think that we can change this culture of individualism? How do you think that we can get people to care again? Because there was actually like an article on NPR today about how faith was used to justify this rugged individualism, that if you're earning, more money, it's because you're doing the right thing. So how can we change that? I know it's a tall order, but.
It is, and it's hugely challenging. But it's why we need public policy folks, fresh public policy folks who think creatively. We need new ideas. And there are some amazing things are being done in local settings. I mean, some of the city planning designs where it's designed for interaction, not for separation. Some of the ideas about well, we'll take the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is all about community and creating, centers where people can get, health. The names flew out of my CCOs. What the heck does it stand for? Coordinated care organizations, where you get your health delivery, but done in a way that can be more collaborative. It's about being aware of building communities for health. My mom, before she died, moved into, she lived in Oregon. It's kind of fringy in terms of that stuff. And my mom was not a touchy-feely person. She didn't want to go live with old people. It just made her nervous. But what she discovered is that in the place, independent living where she moved in, they had a lot of way of looking out for each other. And she became one of their leaders and, activists. Before she had her other jobs she had to go out and do. But it was a great way. So I think there's some innovative ways of doing it, but I think we need new ideas. And that's why your work is so important, because we've got to think creatively about it. And don't let anybody tell you, oh yeah, we tried that back in 1963 and it failed, and I'm sure it won't work. Didn't work then, won't work now. Don't listen to them. Just do it. Just do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The long walk for the 5%, okay, or the 1%.
Have you ever thought about trying to get a private conference with Bill O'Reilly? Both Bill O'Reilly and Paul Ryan are Roman Catholics, and they're part of the problem.
Well, I haven't done I've done private with Paul Ryan a few times, but not with Bill O'Reilly. I was on his show twice, and the second time I was on his show, apparently he got a lot of negative feedback because people said he'd been mean to me. I didn't think he had. I just thought we had a sparring thing going on. And, well, you have to know, when they have you up on the screen, two different places, the guest is sitting in a black room, a small black room that has a camera on you and some kind of backdrop that you're against. And you don't see the host, you just hear him in your ear. So you don't know when the camera's on you or when it's not. I mean, it's really an interesting experience. But I apparently was fairly feisty with Bill O'Reilly. You're probably surprised to hear that. But anyway, he got a lot of negative mail, such that I understand he had to bring it up the next day and say he was just trying to keep me answering the questions. But since then, I've never been invited back to a show. So I have a hunch I'm not the missionary for him. We have to find somebody else who can wiggle it in. But here's the deal. We have siloed media. And I think one of our biggest challenges to create community is to break out of siloed media, because I cannot abide listening to Fox News. And folks who listen to Fox News cannot abide listening to PBS or NPR. So the challenge is, where do we cross-pollinate our ideas? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lorraine
Hi, Lorraine.
Skeen, and I am a great admirer of
Oh,
yours.
good.
My question actually follows up on the last one. My husband and I both go to Catholic church regularly, and very often before an election, the priest will get up and they will talk about abortion, and they make it very clear that in your conscience, the highest issue is abortion, and you have an obligation to vote for those candidates that are pro-life. But too often, the pro-life candidates are the ones that are not pro-poor. And I do not always hear the word of Christ coming from them. And I feel too often that the Catholic vote is dominated by a hierarchy that forces us to vote against what would help the poor.
Self-interest, yeah. Well, I've gotten bolder on this topic. I had to practice saying abortion in front of the mirror just because I found I did not want to be identified with that part of our beloved church. Right now, we have a great leader in Pope Francis, and and great people. The challenge is we still have a middle management issue. And It's not changing quickly, but it's changing. And the fact is, I mean, I say quite candidly, I'm pro-life and pro-choice. And that pro-life is really, that so many people who call themselves pro-life are really only pro-birth. So let's be real about it. And I don't think abortion is a good idea. I don't know any woman, anyone who thinks like, oh yeah, let's go have an abortion. Doesn't that sound great? I mean, that is not the choice. It's some horrible situations that people get into. And my attitude really changed when I got appointed by the court to represent Jamie, who at the time, I think it was either 12 or 13. I shared the story earlier. And she had been raped by her uncle and was pregnant. And I, as her attorney, had a responsibility to talk with her about choices, and including abortion. Praise God she had a spontaneous miscarriage. But can you imagine a 12 or 13-year-old carrying a baby to term? I mean, what does that do to the baby, to the 13-year-old? I mean, really. So what I have realized is that those pronouncements are usually done by people who have no clue of the anguish. And what we have to do is people whose hearts have been broken by hard situations is be bold enough to talk about the muddled middle and that it's not so clear, But it's hard to talk about a broken heart. It's hard. Thank you for raising it. Important. Yes?
Hi, sister. Thanks so much for being here. It's really
It's
special.
an honor. Thank you.
My name is Divya, and I come from a family that is really politically progressive and really committed to social justice and also really Catholic. And it's been really interesting for me to talk about things in a faith-based way in my home that I've never really found affirmed in the church. And now, after 4 years at Princeton, I think I'm in a community of people that I align with politically, but don't really share the same faith tradition. And so I'm wondering what advice you have for someone like me who feels a strong sense of the kind of community that you can get from religion and the kind that I feel with my family, but someone who's as young as me and not an old white man, doesn't have their voice heard in the church. So what are some ways that, that people like me can kind of be a force against that hegemony?
Praise God for you and for folks like you. Thank you. There's a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of Service Corps type places where you develop community. The one I know best is Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and where you live in community, you do service, you get paid a pittance, but you manage to live. But you live community and you get to live your faith in the process, which is exciting. There's a whole bunch of folks like us around the country. It's just that because of individualism, we've been hard to find. And finding that wherever you land, there are folks there. And one way to do it is through my organization, Network. Networklobby.org is where educate, organize, and lobby for economic and social transformation. I mean, that's our mission. But we know people all over the country. And my usual suggestion is go look for where the nuns go to church. Because we're shoppers. And we, not everybody, but often know where live communities are. One of the things that I think is really hard for young people is that you may find a community when you're in college or a graduate program, and then when you're out on your own, it's much harder to do because you don't have a campus ministry, you don't have a way of coming together. And so, but every place I've been, there's been some folks. So email me. We ought to have probably some sort of Google search for real alive Catholics, and where do we find each other, or a Facebook page with secret handshakes so we don't get outed or something. But it is possible there are people around. And I'll tell you that there are, well, you see the crowd here, kind of a lot of gray hair on this side. We're really eager to welcome in this side because the hunger is real for all of us. And you might have to listen to a few of our stories, but we're more than willing to listen to yours too. But it is doable out there. And with Pope Francis's leadership, it's making a huge change, because he's challenging all of our leadership, all that middle management to change their ways. And if you want a good read, if you haven't read Joy of the Gospel, just read the chapter on the economy and peace building. It makes my heart sing. It's fabulous. Nourishment for you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I have two questions. First of all, I attended a conference in January that you may know about. It was by the Trinity Institute on Wall Street.
Oh, I read about it, yeah. I saw tweets about it.
Yeah, it was fabulous. Creating Common Good, a practical conference for economic equity. And frankly, it was live streamed all over the country and Canada and London. And it had some real heavy hitters, Cornel West and the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Barbara Ehrenreich, who wrote Nickeled and Dimed, and Robert Reich, who was the Secretary of Labor under Clinton. I'm trying to get pieces of it done here in the Princeton area. So if you're going to be here and want to work with me, I would love it. That would be great, or anybody else who wants to.
I think that your better bet is all the others here who are here. Great agenda.
That was one question. The other question.
No, that was an advertisement.
It was an advertisement, but it was a question. I mean, I have my card. I was ready to give it to you. But the other question is, one of the things that I've heard about since I've been more passionate about this is thinking about countries that were like in Scandinavia and other parts of Europe where they tax on wealth instead of income. Those countries don't have the disparity that we have, and they have a higher concentration of happiness. Would that be something that your group might consider looking at?
Actually, it's interesting. We got into the income and wealth disparity issue because of a book called Spirit Level, which is a study by Wilkinson and Pickett, who studied the UN measures for quality of life and matched it with income and wealth disparity. And what they found was where there's a greater disparity, there's a lower quality of life for everybody. And so that's how we got into that. The mechanisms for doing it, we're political pragmatists. We lobby in DC. I figure I'm a Catholic sister, that's a nice thing, and then I'm a lawyer and a lobbyist. Hopefully it balances out. But because we lobby, we go for practical things. We need other folks on the outside of the lobby to create visions of alternatives. Some of the young people creating these visions of alternatives, and then we need some locations to try things out to see what really works. One of the criticisms of the Scandinavian countries is that they're fairly homogeneous, and because they're cooped up all for 9 months of the year, that they have a tendency to see community differently than we do. That criticism, it's the one I hear in DC, but I think we can't say that it's evidence that it can be done differently. What the way to do it differently is, there's a whole bunch of ideas out there, but it's a good one. It's a good one. Great. Abby. Thanks for being a good sport, too.
Anytime. So I'm curious about how demographic changes play into your work, because we're seeing a population, the younger population is more and more diverse, particularly more and more Hispanic, which obviously has implications for the Catholic Church and also for how we view inequality and how the older generation views the younger generation and the wealthier view the poorer and all of those things. So I'm curious about how that affects what you do.
Well, obviously, especially the change in racial and ethnic realities is a huge issue. We can really learn from our Hispanic brothers and sisters about community and about creating a broader sense of family. I think that challenges are the dealing with the fear factor, that because folks see our nation changing, there's a fair amount of fear that then generates a negative reaction, the pull up the drawbridge, be afraid reaction, as opposed to open out, walk towards the new, welcome the different, learn from it, and learn together. So what we try to do is to build a diverse and broad coalitions that then can have everybody at the table. The last bus trip, okay, everybody knows the bus trips, okay? And we go around the country, we have stops, we do like 4 stops a day. It's an incredibly fabulous experience, intense work. And, but what we do at each stop is to make sure that the local community is lifted up. And so, for instance, when we were in Atlanta, Georgia, we made sure that we went to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to hear from the grandfathers of the movement, and then went to the Hispanic community. There's a huge Hispanic community in Atlanta, and to hear their stories. And por eso yo puedo hablar en español. So I can't speak in Spanish, so it's not perfect, but it's enough to communicate and do a little press in Spanish so that we can weave this thing together. The other piece about immigrants, historically immigrants have been less confident in entering into the political process till the 2nd or 3rd generation. And that's true of all immigrants. I mean, one of my great-grandfathers came from Spain, and he was a cigar roller. And it was only later generations that got engaged politically. But we've got to welcome in the new and the diverse. It's a challenge to not trip up other people's fears. One of the challenges is in our extremely wealthy country is we have the idea of scarcity. A lot of the political rhetoric is about scarcity. Liar, liar, pants on fire. And the fact is, it's really about political will. And if we frighten people to death, then we hold on tighter. If you know I have your back and I know you have mine, I'm willing to share. That was the fun thing with Stephen Colbert was, I got to tell him one of the snippets is he was saying about how he needed to hold on to his stuff, and I said, well, there's enough to go around. Jesus says there's enough to go around if we share, and that's what we have to do. Help people relax, so we're in it together. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Sam Daly Harris. I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And
congratulations, thank you.
Here's my question. You've probably talked a lot of places with a lot of big crowds. You just said a moment ago, it's really an issue of political will. Anything that you might say on the discouragement and the cynicism that are in so many people about their voices, using their voices as citizens? It's kind of my sense that most organizations pretty much offer kindergarten curriculums, a mouse click here, a check there, a Hill Day one day a year kind of thing, maybe a little bit more than that. Anything about this civic drought that we're all in?
Good point. No, but what I do see is that our bus driving around makes a difference for hope. And what I think we have a drought of is a drought of hope. And what I've realized is that hope is a communal virtue. I cannot go off by myself and generate hope. I can only it's a byproduct of being together. And so my theory of change is that if we come and shine a light on communities and have a modicum of joy and a modicum of gratitude for the gifts we've been given, that generates hope and it draws people together. I think the fact that I use humor is really important for a movement, because too often when I was a young progressive, we could get really grim. And it wasn't a very attractive or appealing thing. Join me because I'm so miserable. So what I've learned is that joy goes a lot further, and I think gives people the sense that we can make a difference. I do worry with you about what's going on, but the only way I know to do it is to go around and kind of be like the circus came to town, the bus showed up. And on the last bus trip we were voter turnout, and if you pledged to vote, if you were at a bus event and you pledged to vote, you got to sign the bus. So that by the end of the bus trip, we had thousands of people on the bus. And the whole idea was to let people know we were in this together, and everyone was on the bus. If I could drive a bus around all the time and get people to, hop on the bus, I'd do it. But it's quite frankly really expensive and quite challenging to do, but it does make a difference, I think. So it really worries me. Another piece that worries me is the way politics is reported. It's reported as a spectator sport, and that makes us couch potatoes. And praise God for Master of Public Policy folks, all your policy folks, is that governance is not a spectator sport. And we've got to change the way it's reported because it's engagement. It's about all of us being involved, and that's what we try to do.
I do have the sense that if you leave behind hope and a structure of support that continues with empowerment.
Exactly. That's what we try to do, and Results is doing good work on that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. How are we doing? We're doing okay, Tom? Yeah. A couple more. Okay, last three. Cool.
Hi, my name is Emily King. I'm a second-year master's student at the Woodrow Wilson School. Hi. Is it not working? Am I not
Emily, I
speaking?
think just speak up. Use your loud and booming voice.
Okay, my loud and outdoor voice. Is that better?
Yeah, better.
Okay,
I'll
great.
repeat it. Don't worry.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk about your work lobbying on behalf of the ACA and what words of wisdom you might pass on to those of us who would be engaged in the next big social justice fight.
The ACA, and what did we learn? Oh man, I think the biggest thing I learned there were two big learnings. It's never over till it's over. Because when I heard that the Catholic bishops had come out opposing it, I was with my community in Los Angeles, and I just burst into tears because I thought it was lost. And I'm at a meeting with my sisters, and some of our sisters from Mexico are saying to me, Simone, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Por qué tú estás llorando? Díganos, por favor. And trying to explain why I was crying was really difficult. And then there was another act to it, so never give up. But the second and even more startling was even after you win a big legislative victory, it's not over, and I did not know that. Most of us did not know that. We thought we had won and we quit fighting for it. And that allowed the negative messaging and the consistent effort to undercut it to take hold. And so don't stop once you win something. We have to stay vigilant and engaged, and even if exhausted, we have to stay with it, and I did not know that before. And the last thing I learned is no matter what, it's worth it. It's worth every minute. We lost immigration reform because of John Boehner. It's horrible, heartbreaking. We can't stop. We got to stay at it. Immigration is the glory of our past and the hope of our future, so we've got to stay at it. But it's hard. But only together we can do it. So stick with it. It's important. Yeah. One more.
I was going to try to avoid underscoring that this is the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty, but the speaker before, the questioner before, did mention hope, did mention change, and some of us feel almost despair, even though we are joyful people, almost despair. at really utter lack of leadership for the past 6 years. I'm wondering if you think, as we do our individual efforts and as we do things in small groups and with our various non-governmental entities, if you think really what we should be doing is focusing on 2016, because it's really over the next year that we'll be pressing candidates and getting folks to speak in a very public way, in a very, not that we can count on anyone following through on their campaign promises, but we are hopeful, and we do look for change. Any thoughts on that, either, the past 6 years, the next 2, and what about 2016? I love nuns. I've been,
thank you.
Thank you. Nuns.
So sweet. Well, you may not love me after I get through with this. We have had in President Obama some amazing leadership in very adverse circumstances. And the utter irony of the polarization in Congress is that many of the amazing things that he has accomplished in the administration, they choose to keep secret, because if it becomes public, the right wing will attempt to undermine it. And so in order to preserve some of the progress, they don't blow their horn very often about some of the work that's been done in housing, some of the work, the Health and Human Services. I know Kathleen Sebelius was here a couple weeks ago. She did amazing work at HHS. Secretary Burwell's doing great work. There's more to be done. But the fact is, some amazing work has been done. The passage of the Affordable Care Act, quite frankly, is miraculous and is a significant move for our country. There's a huge amount more to do. And I think we put too much stock in a single individual, or the one who's running for president, or the one who is our senator or member of Congress. The fact is, it's all up to us. And when you see when the wind changes, politicians change. Leadership does not come from DC. Leadership comes from around the country. And what we have to do is have the courage to stand up and do our part, and then demand accountability, or hold them to, take them to task if they don't do it. But we also have to be clear-eyed about what they're actually doing. And quite often, the president, because he was sort of a Rorschach test for all of us, we all thought he was going to be our answer after 8 very challenging years. Oh, nirvana had arrived. Well, that was totally unrealistic, because he's a moderate. He's a centrist. He attempts to govern by bringing people together. And when you bring people together, you don't get my private pet agenda solved. Now, I know if I were God, things would be a lot better, but, God's still God, and I'm not it. So what we have to do is be realistic about what's possible, support our politicians, but know that leadership comes from us. We got to try new things. We have to try new things, y'all. We got to figure out new ways. I was in Asheville, North Carolina on the bus, and Asheville, North Carolina, they did an amazing thing where they passed a higher minimum wage. And then the state, you may have heard about Moral Mondays and all this, the state legislature has just been nuts, took away the power of cities or other jurisdictions to raise the minimum wage because they just thought $7.25 an hour was just fine, just fine. Anyway, I get in my southern goof-off language. But what Asheville said was, they said, no, we're a better society if we do this. So what did they do? They came together and created a certification process of businesses that pay living wages. And they've certified over 400 small businesses, and they publish the names of the small businesses in the newspaper so everybody in town knows who to patronize. I mean, that's a fabulous, innovative thing that we can do, and that creates pressure and leadership for making a change nationally. Those kinds of things we got to do. We got to do. Anyway, one last question, Hannah, and then I can.
We spoke about this a little bit earlier, but given your message of building community and the importance of making everyone realize we're all in this together, what do we do given that our intense income segregation has led to actual residential segregation too. And people in this room probably don't see Trenton as part of their community. They don't see other places as part of their community. So given that if we really are all in this together, that means you need to accept that we're all in this together. How do you spread that message, and how do you make people realize that the community that you're talking about is not just the community of people that people see every day?
Good, fabulous question. As well, and this is where I talk about that we're all now that you're part of this, you all become missionaries for the common good. And wherever we are, we have an obligation not to talk about sports or just stay silent in my private book because I'm afraid somebody will talk to me, but rather engage in conversation. So I call it grocery store missionary work. Wherever you stand in line, any place. We don't do it that much anymore, if you notice, because you can do everything online. So we're not in relationship, but wherever you are, talk to somebody in front of you or behind you and say, hey, I've been really worried about minimum wage and the fact we've got this huge income and wealth disparity in our nation. Do you think about that? You know what I found out? I do it. And what I've discovered is that people have thought about it, but nobody ever talks about it. We got to reclaim our democracy by having serious conversations, not just those, high five sport things. Because if we don't, we're really going to lose it. Do you know that in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, people came to listen to Lincoln-Douglas debates for 3 hours in the afternoon, would go home, have dinner, and come back for another 2 or 3. I get told in my media training, you got 20 seconds to say something meaningful. And 140 characters on Twitter. I mean, it's really challenging, but we've got to break out of this. And conversation's the only way I know to do it. I advise grocery stores because grocery stores, you won't be in line too long. So if the conversation goes bad, you can survive. But the other challenge is I have to be willing to listen. It's not asking a question so I get to pontificate. It's asking a question so I hear what somebody else thinks. Because the only person you can change is yourself. And the challenge is we all need to change a little bit. And when I hear another story, I'm changed by that story. So we are in this together. So maybe to end, can I end with another poem? Because I think it's the risk. I'll do a poem that's about the risk of creativity, the risk of adventure, and the fact that we all want to do it in a set way, but sometimes it doesn't work. Or does work, or whatever. Anyway, it's called Living Waters. And it's also for me about the spiritual life, but since I'm at Princeton, I don't know if you talk about it, but it's that, you'll see, never mind. And it'll be for you whatever it is, and I shouldn't explain too much, people tell me. Okay, Living Waters. Impetuous me favors the passionate tumult of spring river flooding. Sensuous me favors the indolent caress of summer river flowing. Reflective me favors the penetrating seep of autumn river trickling. Even aloof, shy me favors the chilled reserve of winter river freezing. But all of me resists evaporation. I resist the sucking, pulling, warm air wresting me from known boundaries. I resist drifting unseen to unknown parts. I resist the uncertainty of unformed floating, yearning rather to surround rocks and carve new paths. I resist the ambiguous, foggy drift. But luckily, at times, I am yanked into air, there, beholding earth's anguish, weeping, raining, puddling, perhaps the beginning of an exuberant spring. Thank you so much.